Please welcome Ray.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, you should have seen Alan going down in this ravine, coming up this ravine. And I forgot all about that. Thanks for bringing that up. Because I walked 50 feet this way and it's straight across. It's connected. I said, hey, Alan, why don't you try this way next time? But at that point, we didn't even know where it was. We had an idea where it was, but we weren't sure because it was forgotten, it was hidden, and it was lost. So when they came in, it was we were both in the research center, and we had heard about it, we knew about it, but never been able to find it. And when they left, I'm just, as my father would say, a bullheaded Dutchman. I said, I'm tired of people asking about it. Let's go find it. And so we set off to find the Schumann family cemetery. We didn't know how many tools we needed when we got down there, and Alan's going to share the whole story with you. But we didn't have everything we needed because it was really hidden. It was really lost, and we didn't know we'd be doing that much digging. We didn't realize how often, and so it expanded from there, from the Schumann Cemetery to what we're going to talk about tonight. And there's probably at least 10 of them that you'll hear about tonight that you may or may not have heard of before. And one of the big things that I found is it surprised me how often people get moved after they're already buried, and how often the stones get moved. And we're gonna hit on that a few times tonight. So what's in a word? All these words: cemetery, graveyard, burial ground, memorial park, necropolis. They pretty much all mean the same thing, with one very small exception. It's all a place where they put remains in the ground. A graveyard is always associated with a church. And you'll find out later, and then when the church disbands, now it's a cemetery. So go ahead and try to figure that out. So that's what we're here to talk about tonight. We're here to talk about lost, forgotten, unknown cemeteries. We hope that there's some out there that I've never heard of that before. That's kind of what we're hoping. And, so that way it will sort of justify all of our hard work. And Alan March is going to come up and steal this microphone from me. Alan here. Let's hear it for Alan.
They built our little adventure at the Schumann Cemetery. It was not an Indiana Jones event, okay? But it was fun. So Dawn Whitaker and her husband from St. Louis visited the Delhi Historical Society. They were tracing the Schumann family because Dawn Whitaker is a descendant of the Schumans. They had done a lot of research. They knew the Schumann family cemetery was in Delhi Township, and they came all the way from St. Louis to find it. They couldn't find it. So they came to the Delhi Historical Society and asked for our help. Ray and I sat down in the research center, asked them a couple of questions, and we referred them to some of our resources. One of our resources is in the other room, it's the Palello room where we store some of our archives. We have a file cabinet full of family histories. Some of those are based on research we've done. Most of those come from the families of Delhi. When they do research with us, when they're done, they share it with us so future generations can learn from it. And in one of those drawers, we found a 4-volume genealogy of the Charles August Schumann family. In there, so this is published 1987. I think a couple other volumes might have been a little bit later, but this particular one is 1987. In there was our tour guide to finding the cemetery. Okay, there we go. So this is one page in there. 1987, a family member had actually visited the cemetery and did this sketch. And it shows the burial places of was it 15 people, Ray? Yeah. 15 people, 14 burial sites. So this was our guide. We knew basically this is what we were going to look for. And as Ray said, it was kind of overgrown. When we finally found the place, Well, we were looking for it. This is Delhi Township in 2022. For those of you who don't know, it's not as big as it used to be. All this gray here, that all used to be Delhi Township. Cleves Warsaw used to be the dividing line. West Price Hill, that was all Delhi. Riverside, Anderson Ferry, all Sailor Park, that was part of Delhi. This graveyard, cemetery, it's not a graveyard, started in Delhi. But after the annexation of the Troutman Station and Anderson Ferry neighborhood in 1909, it became in the city of Cincinnati, and it still is. When we finally went down the chasm and back up, and Ray took the shortcut around the level ground, this is what we found. Schmott, right. You may not see it very well, but there's a couple of posts standing there. Got them highlighted here in yellow, still might be hard to see. They're about 8 or 9 feet tall, and they are connected with 1-inch thick ropes. Now this isn't going to keep anybody out physically, didn't keep us out, but it's a visual demarcation. We knew we were at the family burial grounds here. So we crossed over, not into the other world.
I don't remember that part.
Ray sees dead people. So the cemetery is overgrown. Trees, vines, honeysuckle, lots of leaves. Hamilton County Park District considers honeysuckle a pest plant. If you have any property, you know what they're talking about. But inside here, hopefully these rectangles will show it, there are stones here. There's actually a few more. So we referred back to our sketch and we thought, okay, we found some stones, but this here in the yellow rectangle, you may not be able to read it, says there are scraps of an iron fence. And you may have seen iron fences in the 1900s houses, properties. Looks like this. I thought, great, we're going to see an iron fence. What we found was a tree that ate the fence. You don't see it very well here, but here, the land is taking back what man has developed. There's a couple of other pieces there, but nothing that you could really call an iron fence. You see there's a grave marker there too. So we decided to start looking for grave markers. Louisa Schumann, in the lower left-hand corner here, and this is roughly where they are laid out in the family burial plot. Louisa was the last person buried here, 1922. So interestingly, as we were rediscovering this, it was a century later. Louisa owned this property. It was part of the Schumann family estate, had been broken up in a couple of different properties from Charles Schumann's children. And in her will, she said, this land and access to it will forever belong to the Schumann family, and it still is today. So it is a private cemetery. Okay. Well, there's Louisa's stone. We'll give you a little context here. You can see a little bit of the rope here. This is Louisa, and these are some of her family members here, their resting place. Some of these stones are very hard to read. So Louisa Schumann, 1851, 1922. Can't quite read it. It said, he that overcometh shall inherit all things. And it's apparently from Revelations. There's a couple Bible quotes on some of these markers. So this is Matilda Schumann, and is she the mother of Louisa?
She is.
She is. She is not. That narrows it down. Okay.
No, she is.
She is, okay.
Yeah, she is.
Charles Schumann was a German immigrant, so is his wife, Matilda, or whoever she was. And this is all in German. At the top there, my 7th grade German class in Adair Junior High says, here ruhet. I knew it meant here rests, or rest in peace. But the rest of it, the German, not only is it German, it's in script, and it is rather weather-worn. We took a photograph and we sent it to Dan Wellert, who has been studying German for his research, and he was able to translate for us. True mother, rest gently in God's peace. The memory of your love is distinguished until he, as well as these, meaning the people already buried here, call us home, see you again in eternity. And there's another quote from Philippians, for to me to live is Jesus, and to die is my gain. These were people of strong faith. So another stone of interest, it's called the sponsal stone. When I first read that, I thought, is that like granite, marble, or something like that? And then Ray pointed out, no. Margaretta and Adam Sponsel are buried there. Okay. Ray is dogged in his research. He found out that Margaretta was a Schumann, and she married Sponsel, who had been working on the Charles Schumann farm. So,
So it's like your boss's daughter?
the farmer's daughter, yes. So it says this is 1987, Sponsel stone is down and in pieces. And in 2022, it still is. But what I find remarkable, somebody actually put these pieces together in a jigsaw puzzle. So they weren't going to try to restore the stone, but they're still treating it with reverence and respect. And I thought that was very impressive. Don't know who did that. I suspect it's a family member, maybe the people that put up that rope and post border. So here's another headstone, and this one is in very good shape, and it's in English. Emma Schumann, born in 1874, so she was born here in the United States. English was her native language. She probably spoke German too. This one is a bit more readable. You may not be able to read it in the distance. I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. Henceforth, there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness. She was going to her reward. Not all stones there are as easy to read. This is the way it looks when we cleared out machetes, pruners, rakes. We were not restoring it. We just wanted to discover it and learn more about it. All we had to do actually was call Peg. Peg knows everything about Delhi. But it's a small family plot, and it's still owned by the family. It's a place of respect, and we should respect what Charles Schumann brought to America. It was a hard work ethic. He became famous for the vineyards he was growing and his wine he was making, even grape juice as a healthy alternative. He was a good businessman. He actually wrote a pamphlet describing to others how they could be successful in growing grapes. Now Ray's going to talk about another place.
Did you let the Schumann family know you found it?
We absolutely have. The question was, does the Schumann family, does Dawn Whitaker now know we found it? Yes. We contacted her, and she's gonna come back, because of course, she wants to see it, that's why she came here. So she's gonna come back and see it, and we'll go down, we'll take her down. It's not easy to get to, Paul Ruffing.
The Schumann family owns it, but is there access off of a road to get to it? Or is
So Louisa was smart enough that when she, in her will, she included an easement to the cemetery. Because in 1922, the area where it sits, and again, we're gonna respect the family and not tell everybody where it is, because there's crazy people out there. There's a couple of them in the back. And so we'll let them know where it is, but she was smart enough to put in an easement to the cemetery, because by 1922, it was starting to get split up.
Did anybody raise questions when all of a sudden you start going back? Any neighbors or any businesses or whatever?
There are no neighbors.
There's
There's no neighbors.
No
One guy
businesses?
told us to move our.
Yeah, one guy told us to move. He was tough. He's tough. He said, you're not allowed to park there. And I said, okay, I'll move it. And I started to say, but this isn't your property. No, moved the car. Went back down into the ravine, climbed back up. Oh no, that was him. All right, so the Universalist Church Cemetery you see on the sign up there. For all of our lives, everybody that's in here, and I don't care how old you are, because this goes back a long way. There's been a cemetery in Delhi called the Delphi Universalist Cemetery. It's been published countless times in books, on maps, and on the World Wide Web. and everybody calls it Delphi. That didn't sit well with me. So Schumann started it, and this continued it. So more research. You can't just sit by and not have an answer. So you see this is Find a Grave. A lot of people who do research for their families, they go to this website, Find a Grave, and they type in a name and they find where a person's buried. And so Find a Grave, we use it a lot in our research. The Delphi Universalist Church Cemetery. Okay, so there it is. The Universalist Church, which combined with the Unitarians a long time ago, their publications say the Delphi Universalist Church Cemetery in Delhi Township. And they say how long it was there, and George Rogers was their second pastor, and he's buried there. So there's a couple places to put it in. Oh, looky here. The History of Delhi Township, published by the Delhi Historical Society. We say George Cullum was a founding member, and when that founding member of the South Bend Baptist Church, which you'll hear about later, when they disbanded, they joined the Delphi Universalist Church. Okay, I know I'm stubborn, but everybody publishes this thing, and it wasn't enough for me. We had to go find out. So what we did know is that the Universalist Church owned the property as far back as 1838. So we also knew that when they disbanded, they deeded the property to a college that is now the University of Akron. You know, right up the street. So I reached out to the University of Akron and talked to their archivist multiple times. And she was able to tell us nothing. She couldn't find anything in their archives. Really? Okay, thank you for your time. So my man here, Mr. March, he knows people. So he gets a hold of somebody he knows at Harvard. You know, I get a state school, he gets Harvard. That tells you who's the smart one in this crew. So he gets a hold of some doctor in Harvard, and she says, oh yeah, we know about it. And here's a book called The Universalist Church in Ohio. And boy, was that chock full of information. It gave us all kinds of stuff we did not know, and it was going closer and closer to eliminating this nasty word here. That book alone threw about 5 shovels full of dirt on that name.
Wow.
All right? So we were close, but not close enough for me. And then fortune shone upon us, and we located the original deed when it was sold to, when John Terry sold it to the trustees of the First Universalist Church in Delhi Township. The First Universalist Church in Delhi. The Universalist Society in Delhi. I stand before you today and very comfortable telling you the name of this place is the Delhi Universalist Cemetery. So, thank you. So forget the Delphi, because there were no Greeks in Delhi in 1838, trust me. So where they came up with that, I don't know. The Delhi.
It was the Lamborghini's family.
It was the Lamborghini family. If you came to our chili royalty presentation a couple months ago, that's right. All right. So where is this thing? So on Covedale Road, in the St. Joseph New Cemetery. Here's the property lines. It's just a half-acre site. It's 100 by 200. To give you an idea, there's the water tower. Really? It's a cemetery in a cemetery. There's Ray and Jenny Whittesetter's house. Right, Helen? Right? Yeah. This is the Garden Grove condominiums that have been there a couple of years now. Formerly the R.C. Whittesetter. Joey's right there. The R.C. Whittesetter forest. So it's directly across the street. There's a fence there. Please don't go there to climb the fence. So this is where it's located. In a bunch of trees. You see the stones down here. So it's on Covedale, but you can't get to it on Covedale. So, paid a visit to the office of St. Joseph New Cemetery, and talked to Jane, and talked to Rob, and talked to Gary, and they led me to this forest of trees, where I found nothing. A hidden cemetery. There's nothing there. There's no stones, no markers. Oh, great, that's just what I need. So I started walking along. Oh, wait a minute, what's this thing up here? Ooh, that looks like that might be something. Well, it is something. It's an obelisk. It's about this tall. It's actually closer to Covedale. It's on the other end of the cemetery, the other end of this plot. As you can see, it's the leaning tower of marble. And there's hardly anything, there's just a little bit of writing is exposed here, just very little. So when I went there, I went with just a hand spade and a whisk broom, and I had a little garden shovel with me, just in case, because you never know. So I had to get down there and see what that said, because I knew nothing, and that's the only thing I saw. We had a map, but it wasn't very good. It was hand-drawn, so I didn't know what that was. So I scraped it back a little bit, and, well, no, that ain't gonna work. So I get out my shovel. It's just a little garden shovel. And I put it in the ground, put my foot on it, and I go like that, and I hear a noise behind me, and I turn around. It's one of the employees of the cemetery. Busted! That's probably a good thing, isn't it, where somebody's in your cemetery digging holes, right? It was Gary who I met an hour ago, and he said, no, we knew you were coming over here, that's why I'm here, and came to help. And help he did, because he was able to push this obelisk up, and I was able to dig around here and throw all the dirt underneath and fill the hole, so now the thing stands straight. And we found out it's in memory of Reverend George Rogers, which they told us about, their second pastor. And there he is. What you see here is this is all dry and this is all wet. Why? Because all of this was underground when we got there. And Gary was good enough to help me take care of that. So he said, walk around a little bit. You'll probably find a few more things. So I did walk around a little bit. And you can see some things. They don't look like much, but more digging ensued. And we came up with a whole bunch more. There's about 24 of them up there. And so we dug them all up. You see Lydia Frakes, consort of David Frakes, Esquire. She died in 1852. Here's William Oliver. He passed in 65. Again, there's about 12 of them up there. Here's a column. So you see, you saw it in the Schumann Cemetery, where most of these stones, markers, they're about this tall and they're vertical. They stand up in the air. Well, guess what happens when they stand up in the air? They fall down. Kids come through the cemetery and kick them, and so they get messed up. So at some point in the history of the Delhi Universalist Cemetery, someone came along and laid them all flat, which was a good thing. It kept them from breaking any further. But then you got dirt on top of it, and guess where the snow lands and the rain. So it's 6 of one, half done the other. So some of them are easier to read than others. Here's the first burial, it was in 1840, Mary Vincent. She lived across the way. She lived on the other side of Covedale Avenue. Her father owned all kinds of property. Here's another Cullum, Alan Cullum. He was the last one there in 1867. That's one of George's sons. Here's our boy George, who keeps coming up, and we're not finished talking about George today. This guy's all over the place. So there's his wife, Rhoda. Here's one of their grandchildren. The reason one's up here is because when we cleared this one off, we saw something I'd never seen before on a tombstone. The guy signed it, the guy who made it. That says J. Humble and Sons, Cincinnati, Ohio. I've never seen that before on a gravestone. I have since, but not from there. The guy signed his work, so he was proud of his work. So Alan says, Ray, you got to find out who that guy is. Thanks, Alan. I was sitting around waiting for something to do. So sure enough, we find him. He's downtown. the corner of 9th and Sycamore, so on the east side of downtown, on the north side of the canal. He's a stone cutter and an engraver, and he makes tombstones, monuments made to order, and look at this, orders from the country promptly attended to. So he liked Delhi. That's John and William, his father and son. So just kind of cool that he signed his work. And we talked about moving bodies. So the grape grower here, one of Nicholas Longworth's buddies, grew a lot of grapes. His name was John Montier. He was one of the trustees that you saw in that original deed. Some of his family was buried there. When the church disbanded, he decided to dig them up, and he took them to Spring Grove Cemetery. So here's his son, here's his wife, and you see what's highlighted from the Delhi grounds. So these are the plot cards from Spring Grove Cemetery that told us that they moved them from Delhi to Spring Grove. Moving bodies, and it's not just young Frankenstein. So this is the same view now. This is what it looks like now, after a lot of work and a lot of visits. The view where we said it's a hidden and a lost and forgotten cemetery, this is what it looks like now. If you were to go there tomorrow, and you go up and ask Jane Garrett at the front desk, hey, I saw this presentation, so some guy told me about there's a cemetery over there by the water tower, and she'll go, yeah. She'll direct you here, and this is what you'll see. So there are 10 stones that are exposed here, there's one over here, there's one over here, there's a whole bunch of them back in here. But now you can go up and you can actually see those stones, and so it's no longer a hidden cemetery, and we hope it's not a forgotten cemetery. All right? Yes, sir.
So will they be taking care of these grounds?
They still do, they take care of them.
Okay, but the Schumann thing, nobody's taking care of that.
That's right. That's right. No one's taking care of that because the closest family lives in Missouri. But here, this is the general, this is in St. Joe's Cemetery, and so they will take care of it. And you know, and when Gary came out and was talking to me, he says, yeah, we cut this. He said, but the great thing, it's all under trees, so the grass doesn't grow very much. We don't have to cut it very often. And of course, I took them off by digging up all these graves and threw the dirt all over the place. I did my best to rake it, you know, whatnot. That's my waterworks experience there, Mark. You know, you dig up the dirt, and you learn how to put it back where it came from. That is the Delhi Universalist Church Cemetery.
Okay, back to the Delhi Township map. If you want to know where the Darby Lee Cemetery is, there it is. We can go home now. This aerial view, I think, helps see it better. Ray's got that fancy laser. Ooh, look at that. So here's Bender Road. Here's the Sisters of Charity here. And this is the roadway to the Hilltop Delhi Post-Acute. So it's like a nursing home there. And there's a driveway around back, and you can actually park there. It is open to the public. And that green dot is exactly where the Darby Lee Cemetery is, but I put the red marker too. When you go up that driveway, up off of Bender Road, and you're taking that nice winding drive, you'll see at the end of that drive, almost in the back of the post-acute building, is this two-car garage. It's okay for you to park there. In fact, the post-acute business, they put a sign on their garage telling you the Darby Lee Cemetery is that way. It's pointing you towards a path. So you can walk behind it. It almost feels like you're trespassing, but it is public. So it's okay for you to go there. So going back to some of our research at the Historical Society, this is from, the history of Delhi Township. So this is about the Darby Lee Cemetery. On the top is the names of those who are buried there. If you want to zoom in on this map, we'll refer to it again. The rectangles with numbers are just saying who the markers are, refers to those names at the top of the cemetery list. The X's are where the actual burials are. And the squares with the C's in there, we'll tell you about in a moment. To the right of that says West Point Road. That was the road across the top, the ridge of the hill there, and that was the roadway when the cemetery was first used. That's now a hiking path, which is maintained by the Western Wildlife Corridor. That takes you down to all the different trails down there. There's about 5 trails in that area. A lot of people go there. You can park down on Bender Road and hike up on the hill. A couple different areas, levels of hiking. It's a great place, but this is the pathway that leads you to the cemetery, and there's a sign guiding you. So back to this map. Those squares that have C's in them, they're called creek stones. Those are early forms of grave markers. And you can see some of them here. So these are the professionally cut gravestones. And we're thinking these creek stones, they were harvested locally, perhaps in a creek. They were probably the first markers for the burials there. The family buried their family members there. Perhaps they couldn't afford a professionally carved stone, or it was marking the resting place until they could get a stone there. So those have remained as well. And here's a close-up of one. No carvings on there. Perhaps when they were first put there to mark the place, somebody may have scratched it in, but 160 some odd years of weather has eroded it. And yet it still marks the place where somebody rests. This is the Darby Lee Cemetery, so the Lee family is here too. And the patriarch of that family, is Peter Lee, Revolutionary War veteran. When he was 20 years old, enlisted in the Continental Army in New Jersey. Served there, and after the war, came west. And he found a home in Delhi Township. Now, the Lee family is not as strong in this part of Delhi. They're actually further west in the area that we now call Sailor Park. When he was buried, he was 92 and a half years old. That's a pretty good long life. So there were some other cemeteries in Delhi. You're probably familiar with those, and we're just going to touch on them quickly because they were of interest, but I don't think any of these are forgotten. Delhi Township has existed since 1816. Before that, it was South Bend Township. South Bend was actually a township before the state of Ohio was a state. People have lived here for hundreds of years, and they've been dying here for the same amount of time. So there's a lot of cemeteries here. St. John Church Graveyard, because it's with the church on Neeb Road. Shiloh Church Graveyard, Anderson Ferry, Delhi Township Cemetery, Neeb Road. Union Baptist Cemetery on Cleves, Warsaw, now in Price Hill, but when it started, it was in Delhi Township. Our Lady Victory Graveyard, Neeb Road. There's a pattern here. Sisters of Charity Cemetery, and we'll talk about each of them quickly, mention a couple of famous people there. I love this picture. St. John's Graveyard has 16 Civil War veterans, and this is Fred Brandhorst. He was a private in the 5th Independent Battery of the Ohio Light Artillery. He survived the Civil War by 60 years. Here's a photo of him in his uniform, and was provided to us by Ray Story, his descendant. I love that he's ready to pull out his saber. Anybody recognize this face? Gene Ruhlman, Mayor Gene Ruhlman. He's also in the St. John Cemetery as well. Western Hills High School grad, go West High. United States Marine Corps, World War II veteran, Cincinnati City Councilman, Mayor of Cincinnati. He is credited with putting together the political will to bring the Bengals and Riverfront Stadium here. He was buried there in 2013. Shiloh United Methodist Church Graveyard, because it's associated with the church. There's a couple burials here. You can't really read them very well. The one on the left is Ann Williams. She and her husband donated the property for the church and the graveyard to Shiloh. She was the first person buried there. Now, I don't know if Peter was thinking, hey, Ann's dying soon, we need to have a place for her, or if it's just a coincidence, but she was the first one buried there in 1828. We've got I think there's 2 Civil War veterans, and there's a War of 1812 veteran there. On the right is Thomas Mayhew, and there are a number of Mayhews there, and we'll hear more about the Mayhew family in a little bit. Oh, one thing I want to point out, you saw some of the stones in the Schumann Cemetery, they're broken. This one obviously has been broken, looks like it's been professionally fixed. Those 2 pieces were put together. This is because, as Ray mentioned, these gravestones do not mark the actual burial place of the people they honor. Anderson Ferry is a lot wider road than it used to be. There's been a lot of plumbing and electrical lights and power lines put in there. So these stones have been moved a couple of times. They still honor the dead, just not in the same spot. Delhi Township Cemetery, you all know this, it's got that really cool gateway over top of it. It was known as the South Bend Cemetery, it was known as the Hopewell Cemetery, it was with the Stony Creek Cemetery, all named for the church of that name. Only lasted about 35 years. By 1835, no, a little bit later than that, I guess, 1830s, the church folded, and they did not leave any provisions for the cemetery to be cared for. Stones started to deteriorate, some got knocked down, some got broken, perhaps vandals, perhaps people needed stone for something. So they're gone. George Cullum, he founded this church here in 1803, but he's not buried there. He's over in the Delhi Universalist Cemetery. This is on Neeb Road. In the background here, just below the hill, there's the police station, and the Township Administration Building is over here. You can park where the War Memorial is and walk up the hill here. It is open to the public. There's about 24 gravestones here, and there's a marker here, which I believe was placed as part of the bicentennial celebration. Wasn't that correct?
I think it was in 89.
89, okay. The Delhi Township Cemetery, the first burial was Betsy Mayhew, 1817. The Union Baptist Cemetery, the Union Baptist Church in downtown Cincinnati was an all African-American church. They needed a cemetery to bury their parishioners. So in 1865, they bought that plat of land on Cleves, Warsaw, way out in the boonies at the time. And they started burying people there. There's, 16 Civil War veterans there, and that may have been what really gave them the impetus to build it. This is Powhatan Beatty, born a slave in 1837, enlisted in the Union Army, and fought. He rose to the rank of sergeant. Blacks could not be officers, so he became a first sergeant, so that was about as high as a black man could go in the Union Army at that time. He was what does it say? Company C of the US, it says USCI, United States Colored Infantry. It was even in the name of their unit. Sometimes you see USCT, which is US Colored Troops. He was part of a regiment of about 93 men, a company of 93 men, who were supposed to take a Confederate position during the Battle of Chaffin Farm. They went forward, and almost all of them died. There was only 16 left, including Beatty. The color bearer was down. He had fallen and laid the colors down on the ground. Beatty got all of his men back to safety, ran 600 yards, grabbed the flag, went back, regrouped his men, and the 16 of them took the position that the 93 of them couldn't. For that, he was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. He eventually came to Cincinnati. He was a very articulate, well-spoken man. He became known as an orator. He actually did some acting. You can see he's a very handsome guy here. I don't know much more about him, but he really seems like somebody you'd like to know more about. Another burial here, another person born as a slave, is Edith Fawcett. Is it her?
And Peter Fawcett.
And Peter Fawcett, her husband. She was born as a slave on Monticello. She was a slave of Thomas Jefferson. When Jefferson became president, he brought her to the White House, and she learned how to be a French cook. Now, if you know anything about Jefferson, he spent a lot of time in France during the Revolution, or just certainly before he became the president, and he was so enamored of it, he made sure she learned how to cook. She became widely known for her skills, and because of that, the Fawcett family passing along their skills. Cincinnati at one time had, 3, 4, or 5-star French restaurants. It all goes back to her. She was emancipated the year Beatty was born, 1837. Our Lady of Victory Church graveyard, first recorded burial 1854. Now, if you look at this photo, the photographer's back is to Neeb Road. To get to the church, you have to walk through the graveyard. Well, you know that graveyard's been moved because that's all pavement now. Graveyard's behind the current church, and if you go through there, it's like going through a who's who of Delhi. You have Feist, Lips, Martini, Clawwaters, Winterstetter. We got one here. At least one. What's that?
They're all winemakers.
They're all winemakers. and Ludwig. The Sisters of Charity Cemetery. It's on the grounds of the Sisters of Charity. First burial here was Mother Regina Mattingly in 1833. Though the sisters predate being here much earlier than that. There's about 1,800 burials here, Ray? Is that right?
Yes.
About 1,800? 2,000 now? Okay. This stone here, you may not be able to see it very well, but if you've ever been to cemeteries and you've seen Civil War veterans gravestones, that's why this is here. Some of the sisters served in the Civil War and Spanish-American War as nurses. The United States remembers and honors their service. Here it says Sister Anthony, U.S. Army nurse. Now there's one person buried there. Many of you watched the Channel 12 special about her. Wasn't that great?
Yes.
Sister Blandina. She is most famous for the work she did out in the American West. Her journal that she kept of all of her activities, including apparently running into some famous desperados. Was it Billy the Kid or Billy the Kid? Apparently she talked him out of at least one gunfight. She is up for sainthood. I don't know exactly where she is in the process. It's a multi-step process. But we think eventually there will be a saint here in Delhi. So the last cemetery we're going to talk about, Ray's going to talk about, Mount El Verno.
So, when that sign went up there, if you're from Delhi, you know what that is, or what that was. So, Mount El Verno School for Boys came to Delhi in 1870, when they bought 100 acres from the William Adams estate. William Adams bought that property from some guy named George Cullum. That guy, you know, when I saw him show up so many times, here's what I thought. That guy's like horse manure. He's all over the trail. That guy is all over Delhi. 100 acres. The Brothers of the Poor of St. Francis is a Franciscan religious organization, and they were charged with taking care of troubled boys. So they started downtown like everything in Cincinnati did, and they decided they needed a much larger ground because they wanted to teach, and they wanted to teach them skills, and they wanted to scare them straight. So they wanted to teach them how to be carpenters, how to be printers, how to be teachers. So hard work to keep them out of trouble, keep them off the streets. And so they got this 100 acres out here in Delhi from the Adams estate, and they built, there was already some buildings on the property. They converted them at the beginning, and they used them for education, they used them for worship, and they used them for housing. As time went on, they added more buildings. They got a lot more things going on. There was actually a church and a parish there called Sacred Heart. It was there for about 30 years. And so because you had a parish, you had baptisms, you had marriages, you had confirmations, you had burials. The brothers took responsibility of the kids from the time, and who's been there? Who's seen this live? Fewer than I thought. So this was here, you'll hear about it until 1972. So it was there over 100 years. Big, beautiful chapel, administration, schools buildings. Over here was a gymnasium. They kept adding on, they kept adding on to support their mission, which was to educate these troubled boys. They took responsibility for them. Here's a nice aerial of the 100 acres. You can see progress is encroaching. These are all houses. So they got there in 1870, and they stayed over 100 years, and they took responsibility for the kids from the time they showed up. And the kids were sent there by the courts. They were sent there by their parents. Many of them were orphans. and this is a place they could go. And so they took responsibility for them from the time they got there until they turned 18, and then they hopefully taught them enough where they could go become, valuable citizens. So if you're gonna be there, and you're gonna worship here, and you're gonna get married here, and you're gonna get buried here, you need a cemetery. I didn't know this 2 months ago. But duh, if they live there, and there's orphans, where are the orphans gonna go? So, they're Franciscan brothers, and some priests, but mostly brothers, when they passed away, they buried them here. Whether it was a member of the Franciscans, or whether it was a 5-year-old boy. It was all boys. So there's a look at the same thing we just saw. So there's the cemetery, main cross, and you see a bunch of gravestones. And that's what you can see when this map was made. Not a whole lot of people were in there yet, but it's the same idea. Again, they had responsibility for them for 18 years, if that be the case. And so, if they died there, and they were orphans, they got buried there. Here is from the files of the Brothers of the Poor of St. Francis, here is a card that tells us about one of those burials. It is in Latin, but lucky for you, you know a guy. And it says that on June the 19th, 1882, Jacobus Fletcher, otherwise known as John, passed away. He was 17 years old. They buried him on the 30th of June, 1882, and the Reverend John Kramer did the service. So they didn't wait long, one day, because this kid, this 17-year-old, sadly, was an orphan. So he got buried in that cemetery we just looked at. Here's another one, and this is the 1900 census, and it shows us Joseph Schaefer. They called them inmates. That's what that says, inmate. He was 11 years old. It's the 19th century. Yeah, well, it just turned the 20th century, but not everybody lived to be 95. So here's a couple examples of kids that didn't make it. Time moves on, things get a little rougher. They're not sending as many kids from the court because there's lots of other places. There's lots of other organizations that are taking kids, and so the attendance starts going down. It's harder to raise money because the brothers were totally self-sustaining. They had to come up with all the money to pay for everything. And so that was harder to do. There's only so many picnic basket festivals you can have. You can only have, they didn't have it yet, but I was going to say, all the gambling that we have now didn't have a whole lot of that. Greens Woods was gone. Lauderback Grove was gone. And they're all going away, so they can't raise the money anymore. So times are tough. So the brothers decide to sell the property to Crest Communities to build Navarro Estates. So this is just one of the lanes that this is going due south. The cemetery is right here. But you can see it's not well cared for at the end. So they sell it. What are we going to do with all them graves? Well. The developer's going to bring a bulldozer in and just bulldoze them under. Well, that's what developers do. Don't get mad at them. That's their job. So, they work out a deal with our friends at the St. Joseph New Cemetery, and this is the main plot card. Again, went over there, and Jane Garrett was so wonderful. She let us look at all these. The Brothers of the Poor of St. Francis is the name of the cemetery. Where was it? It was at Greenwell, Mount Vernon. That's where it was. Where they dug them all up. There were 125 bodies. They dug them all up and moved them to the priest's lot, section 12. It says clergy on the sign now. And 125, 60 grave spaces. Red, you go to West High, your math is terrible. How does that happen? Well, we'll explain that to you. The bodies were removed from Mount Alverno School Cemetery starting June the 5th, 1972, and completed June the 15th. 10 days. Them boys were humping it. They moved all those bodies in 10 days and put them in plots in St. Joseph New Cemetery. In each one of these, there are multiple bodies. Some of them are over 100 years old. When you got buried in 1870, 1880, 1890, you may or may not have had a coffin. If you did, and it was of poor quality, you know, J. Humble probably wasn't making the gravestones back there for them. It deteriorates. So when you dig it up, guess what you got? A bag of bones. And so as cruel as this sounds, one bag of bones got put with another bag of bones and another bag of bones. There's no other way to do it. Because it might just, the skull is probably gone. You might have a couple of the bigger bones, the tibia or the fibula or something. But so they put them all in another box. And so all of the graves now, all the markers have multiple folks in them, as you see here. So this is an example of one that mentions all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 15 or 16 on that. They're all underneath there. We're so lucky that the brothers did a great job of knowing who was where. And then when they turned it over to St. Joe, they did a spectacular job of keeping track of it. And so they had stones, they had markers made for all of them. And there's multiples in every one of those. That's how you get 125 people in 60 spaces. Right? So here's a close-up of one of those stones. And what do we see? Our 17-year-old and our 11-year-old. It doesn't say brother in front of their names because they were children. They moved them. They kept a great care of them. You want to know you want to know how to find him? Want to go see him, pay some respects? All you Irish out there, this is across the street from Crow's Nest. Okay? So Crow's Nest is right here. Here's the mausoleum. That is Nebraska. That is Rapid Run. This stone here, this is all those stones lined up. There are 2 rows of them. They're all lined up. There's 30 in each row. If you find a mausoleum, you find this. It's in the clergy section. Right here, it's not in the image. If you find a gigantic crucifix, and underneath that crucifix it says Archbishop William Elder, you know you're in the right spot. Well, what's there now? We moved all those bodies. What happened there? What's there now? Houses. So this is 1968. So here's the buildings, the chapel, the school, all the barns are back here. You can see they're growing trees. Here's your cemetery. Put a nice little brown spot on there. Here's the cemetery in 1968. Let's zoom in on it a little bit so you can see better. So there's the cemetery. There's that lane that we showed you from 1972. There's your cemetery. What's there now? Troubadour Court. Go back Greenwell, turn left on Francis Ridge, and left on Troubadour, and these 4 houses. If we go back, these 4 houses are right here. Are right here. So, who lives on Troubadour Court? Somebody, please. If you know somebody on Troubadour Court, tell them to call me because I want to see if they got a stone in their basement. Because you know them developers, after those bodies got moved, they just took them stones and just threw them anywhere. I'm hoping they put them in somebody's basement. I'd love to see one. So cemeteries, they're hidden, they're forgotten, they're lost. We're so glad you came to see us tonight. This is a great cow. They told me death sells, apparently. It's true. Because I know you're not here to see me. So we're glad you came. I see a lot of familiar faces, and we're really, really happy that you came to hear about these. Hopefully you saw something you never seen before about a cemetery you had nothing, that you didn't know anything about. Yes, ma'am.
I was actually in Schumann back in 2014 when
In 14, they still had the wrought iron fence.
Yeah.
Ooh, I need to see pictures.
Yeah,
of
I
it.
keep hearing that. It's
Yeah.
real
Yeah, it
beyond.
was, you could walk it, she took us down some path and there it was.
Right, right. I mean, it's there. If you know where you're going, you can walk down that path and you can get there. If you're coming from Hillside Avenue, good luck going back up.
Right.
You could be like Alan.
Is that something you'll
Dun, 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 dun. He's gonna be climbing another ravine. Questions of any one of those 10 cemeteries? Lights, please. Lights, please. Nobody has any questions? Yeah, oh, yes, I'm
I
sorry.
don't have a question, but I just wanted to tell you, the cemetery, Shiloh, the gravestones were all at one point falling over.
About an hour.
My son,
Yeah.
my son and my husband and the troop, repaired all of the headstones. And, with concrete, my husband does concrete work, so they did that, and he's probably the one that fixed the stone that you're showing. But I do have a question, because they were talking about how,
Congregation,
speaking of bodies being buried, they thought there may have been bodies underneath, Anderson Ferry.
We've heard that too.
Okay.
Hard to prove at this point. Because right there at Anderson Ferry where it meets Foley, it's 5 lanes wide now. When those were buried, when that was started, it was 1.5 lanes because it was dirt, because it was 1850. So is it possible? It's absolutely possible. But, you know, and your family helped fix those stones, and they do look great. That's the best ones around because they're all standing up straight, and you know, they're clean as well as you can clean them. It's hard to clean a gravestone. Please don't do it with a wire brush. Please don't. Please don't do it with a brush. But they've moved those multiple times. They have moved Shiloh's multiple times. They have moved the Delhi Cemetery at the administration multiple times. Because they need to build a new police station. So they're gonna move them. You know, progress gets in the way, so they move them. Same thing happened at Shiloh. They needed Anderson Ferry to be wider to, you know, because a lot of people live in Delhi now. And so they needed more room. You know, the original church there, well, the white church that's on the corner now, it's not the original, but that used to be nowhere near the street. You know, but you widen the street because progress gets in the way. Yes, sir.
Yeah, a while back, you, showed that one, nun that they said was gonna
Sister Blandine.
You're like me.
sing, would she be
I
part of
usually think about it when I'm driving home. You know,
Veronica? Was she a black hat? Was Sister Blandine a black hat?
remember go up there and bark and look at that house.
They were like nurses,
Yes.
they were Civil War,
Look at,
Right,
yeah,
right.
when you get home.
and there was a group of them, and they called them black hats.
It is huge.
She did not serve in the Civil War, so if they were only in the Civil War, the answer would be no. But I don't know. But I know she wasn't around in the Civil War, so we know she didn't serve.
That would've been-
If that's the only time they were, then no.
Yeah.
But I don't know enough about that. I can't speak to it because I don't know enough about it. Mr. Pritchard recently retired, 45 years as Delhi Township fireman. Yes, sir.
You, left out something I thought was interesting. Kind of run a boys' school for troubled boys.
Yeah.
Isn't that where you and Alan come
And I didn't even pay you for that. So listen, that reminds me of something. So many people were sad to see Mount Alverno go because it was quite an establishment and it was loved. Not so the police department and the local businesses. Because they were teenage boys with very little guidance at 10 p.m. Take that where you want. So that's what Pete's talking about. If there aren't any other questions, I do have one more really bad joke, and that is, we're putting the nail in the coffin of the hidden cemeteries. Come on, that's good. Yeah.